Professionally trained for that.
Please tell us your story. Very
I am quite interested to see you all. Usually I have the other impact of sending people out or making people sleep. As a professional, I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church, which is the church of equivalent of Church of England. And my wife used to say to people with young children, bring them to church, Isaac will do you a good job of putting the children to sleep. So. And also, this is quite amazing. I can't believe we are all living in the same island. When I left Aberdeen, it was freezing, well, kind of chilly. Here it's so nice and warm. That really takes me back to one Friday midday 4 years ago in 2011 in November. And I'm pleased to see someone from the west of Scotland here. You get the feel for things when it gets chilly. It goes right through your bones, and it was one of those days. Usually on Friday mornings we have prayers in the church, and that day I stayed on for a while to set things up. And around midday I was walking past from the church to the car park, and as I walked past I noticed a few people sitting on the gravel on the floor outside the building getting ready for prayers. And I have to give you some geographical dynamics. St. John's is in the city centre of Aberdeen, and between the church hall and the church, in 1980, a new building was built for the diocesan office, and the bishop had bigger plans, and he wanted to move the office to a different place. So the building became vacant 5 years later, and so the building was sold out, and the businessman held the property for a while, and then he passed it on to another businessman, and this businessman owns an Indian restaurant in Aberdeen. And he had a few staff, and also there were quite a few Indian restaurants. So most people who needed somewhere to go and pray on Fridays, either they have to travel at least 2 or 3 miles across the city to other place, or they find somewhere to pray. So I gathered those who were in the city centre found the restaurant a quieter place for prayer on Fridays. But the problem there was they have to walk past the bar. It's not a done thing if you're going to go for prayers on Friday. So they were looking for another place. And when this building came up, the owner firstly bought it to convert it into an office block. And then when he felt the need for somewhere for people to come and pray, he turned the building into a prayer room, and the application was launched with the City Council. And the City Council sought our consent to convert the building for Islamic prayers. That was the first hurdle in 2008. Hurdle in the sense, it was a challenge. You don't really conceive, at least the church people have never conceived that a building in their property will one day be used for Islamic prayers. So that came as a surprise. So we had to really think seriously how we are going to respond to this. And we gave ourselves some time, and after I wrote to the council and said, it's good to hear that there is another group of people who want to pray, and it is my job to encourage people to pray. And as a community, Christian praying community, we want to welcome our neighbors, and so we want the council to grant permission for the building to be converted to a prayer room. So the room was converted into a prayer room, and the owner, Mr. Farooq Ahmed, initially they had about 20 people or so, but he invested quite a lot of money in turning it into a beautiful place. So the 20 within a year turned to 200. And at that point, he approached me because the church halls were right beside this building. And he said, could we use the hall? There was a minor problem that there was a thick wall about 3 feet wide, but they were quite happy to go ahead. Parallel buildings. The mosque prayers are said in one building, and the halls were opened, and people would come. The overspill would come into the hall. But the hall needed repairs, and that's the point when the hall was not available. The overflow had to go somewhere, and because there was no space, I found people praying on the gravel outside the building. That afternoon, as I was walking past, because it was so cold, you can see the breath, the steam coming out of people, as it were. And I walked past, went to the car, and I sat there. And that's the moment when I felt restless and uncomfortable. I deeply felt that I've seen something which is wrong. I felt strongly about that because I just came out of the church building, which is 4 times bigger than the prayer room. It remains empty on a Friday midday. Yet that building next door is locked up, and I see people outside on the gravel, exposed to the elements, trying to pray. I suppose being austere and being disciplined about prayer, cold might help. I don't know, but I felt this is wrong and I have to do something. So I came back again and almost sat alongside those who were praying for a while, just to get the feel for myself. And what was going in, both in my mind and I was feeling in the gut, is the phrase that we are focusing on: love your neighbor as yourself. That's where love gets a bit complicated. When you think about it, when you speak about it romantically, that's one thing. But when you know that somebody's suffering, and that either you have to be highly disciplined to walk away from seeing the suffering, or you try to encounter that as much as possible, express some solidarity with the suffering, and then do something about it. Those are the steps. And I felt very strongly at that point, I cannot walk away. So I went home. The whole day was restless, and the Saturday passed. And on Sunday, I began to have conversation with key people in the church. People, when they heard me speak about the possibility of inviting people, the overflow, instead of kneeling and praying outside on the gravel, they could come inside the church and use the space on Fridays. As a concept for people who are not even used to having a mosque anywhere near, and Aberdeen until recently, now the Lord Provost claims that Aberdeen is the cosmopolitan city in Scotland, but that's not the case 10 years ago. Oil industry changed all that. But so for people who are used to or not used to seeing a mosque or Islamic people from Islamic community or prayer gathering for prayer somewhere close to the city center is unimaginable. And you go and talk to them and say, well, guess what? I'm going to invite our neighbors to come and use the church building. It needed a lot of thought and reflection on their behalf before they could respond. So most of them were completely stunned, besides giving me a look. Are you really sure? Well, given the global context, even at that point, about 6 years ago, with anyone with a sense who was committed to a particular faith commitment can't dare to think these things. you cannot. But anyway, they kept silent, and on Monday I sent out an email to the vestry or the church people to say, I think what I've seen is wrong, and as someone who believes love your neighbor as yourself, I feel we need to do something. And my simple suggestion would be to offer the church building for people, instead of praying outside on the gravel, to come and use the church building. And there was no reply except for one who said, that's not our problem. And he copied the rest, and this is the kind of chain reaction that builds up, and people, suddenly everyone is up in arms, and I replied back to all and said, before people start responding to it and copying everyone in, if you can hold back, give yourself some time, and let's come to some understanding by the coming Friday. So that's what happened. And I also explained that if I had not seen it, it will not be our problem, but I have seen it. It has become my problem. I cannot, and we cannot walk away. What we believe, we have to practice. And one of the things that in our prayers is a statement that we make week after week, and this is a very kind of bold statement in our Scottish prayers, which is, God is love and we are God's children. Period. There is no negotiating there. God is love and we are God's children. There is no qualification. And that's what I kept emphasizing. You cannot make deals with this. Thankfully, by Friday they responded, and I spoke to the imam next door and also the leaders there, and I said, the church would like to open its doors to people who want to come and use it if there is an overspill. And the following Friday, we left the doors open, and here begins the tensions and the problems. People did walk in, and the imam, he came in and laid some carpets inside the building, in between the pews, and the orientation is a problem because the church is east-west, mostly facing east, and the pews are really solid rock solid, and you can't move them. So people have to negotiate the space. And those who are praying facing the Mecca, so it has to be oriented towards east. And on the east wall or the south wall, when they have to turn south. The churches were facing east, and people who have to turn to Mecca, they have to turn south. And on the south wall, there is a stained glass window of the risen Christ. We have a problem here again, because it is very strict in the Islamic faith that you do not have any image or anything in front of you when you pray. What do we do? So I said to the imam and to the leaders and said, if you want to put a curtain or something to block it off, I'm open to it, but it's up to you. And they very wisely said, just leave it. Let people deal with it. And so the other problem was the mosque and the church buildings were apart, at least about 10 meters away. They have to synchronize their prayers. And I said, let us try this, let us experiment, because we have 2 radio microphones. And I said to the imam, why not just do, because the radio microphones, I know, doesn't even work within the church. It's impossible that it's going to work from the mosque about 10 meters away from the building. So I said, let's give it a go and see. You won't believe this is true. I have recording of it the first time when the imam sang the call for prayer, the adhan. The microphone picked up much better than when it's being used within the church. And you can hear the whole call for prayer, and the prayers itself and the sermon so clearly broadcast within the church so beautifully. For me, sitting there to hear the call for prayer sung from the mosque and heard inside the church through the church PA system, that was a moment of complete transformation. And I thought, yes, this is what it means that God is one. It really means that this is what we are about. So the first day happened, one person walked in, and gradually the whole space between the pews were filled. People were in the wrong direction, as it were, from the church, but praying very comfortably. And I thought, this is beyond what one can imagine. And that day I felt, yeah, things are possible. If you make one small step in faith and trust, things will change. And by the third week, nobody even batted an eye that they were doing something different. Nobody bothered. And the question came about the stained glass window I myself raised. How do you, does it not bother that you have images in front of you? And they said, Isaac, that's part of the building, that's part of the fabric. We are not putting something in front of us to fall before it and pray. We don't see any problem, because in history people have done it elsewhere quite comfortably, so it doesn't bother us. It happened for 6 months, and then by then the church hall was completed and it's in a very high good standard. But there was still the problem of the separation between the mosque and the hall. And somebody one day came and said, do we need the wall? And I said, well, good question. Well, if you can break through, I don't think we would have a problem. So that literally a 3-foot wall is now broken through, and for every Friday, the place will be packed, mobbed completely, both the halls, church halls, and the mosque. During Ramadan, I join in prayers, and the moving things that if there is a global crisis, and if there are situations where, for some reason, the Islamic community feels vulnerable, they always ask me, please do dua, please pray with us and pray for us. And that, for me, is, if at all, if it had made any impact, both locally and globally, I thought this is a blessing. But anyway, that happened in 2011, and we just now still carry on. But in 2013, my bishop, Rob Gillis, he felt that this is something unique and the world should know. So he spoke to the local media, the Press and Journal, and he said, you might be interested in the story. So he had arranged for an interview, and on the day of the interview, I completely forgot that I'm supposed to be at the Press and Journal office. The meeting was at 9:15, and 9:30 and 9:15, the bishop phones me. Isaac, I'm assuming that you're on your way. And as a good Christian, I lied so easily. And I said, yes, yes, Bishop, I am on my way. And I did manage to get there in 5 minutes. And I wasn't prepared, because I was supposed to prepare an A4 page of my story and then give the story. Now I had to lie my way through the whole thing. So the journalists, about 4 of them, with the chief editor, all sitting there, and the bishop and the 3 other clergy, and I was kind of sweating, and I thought, no, this is real. I'm not making up, and what we have experienced here is a real blessing. didn't have any problem. I told the story, and the next day on Monday, the story was released in the paper, Press and Journal. By 1 o'clock, all the national media were picking up, and I was getting phone calls. So I thought, I'm going to hide. So I literally went and found there's one room where nobody could find. It's almost like between the toilets, squeezed in. I thought, nobody will get me here. Turn off the phone and hiding there. And then there was a glass window, and I saw a couple of people. One was knocking on the door, and behind them was a huge big camera. Now that is the moment you have to make a choice. There is no more hiding, because anything that I do or say, this is going to make the news. And I said, come in. And the following, that evening, the ITV broadcast it, and the following Sunday, Easter morning, by Friday, BBC came and did the recording, and by Sunday for Easter, Sunday morning, that was kind of a global news. I thought, wow, it feels like being on top of the world. Sadly, it didn't last. Within a couple of hours, my email inbox was filling, and the church Facebook page was being attacked ruthlessly. The things that especially people of Christian faith and tradition, the language and the anger and the frustration that came through, it was beyond my imagination. And by Thursday, I kind of shut the door, hiding in the house, and the bishop came to the door, rang the bell. I wouldn't open because I didn't know who was at the door. It was quite frightening, but then he walked away. I saw him as he was going back onto the road. And I went after him, and he said, well, I know what's happening. Let's keep calm. It will pass. But thankfully, a week or two later, the positive, affirming messages were coming across. And the greater benefit beyond people of faiths reacting to it, the city council was quite excited because it's seen as a positive message for all the oil-rich nations around the world, that the Christian church welcomes Muslims into the church. It's good for business. So things have changed, and at that point, a good friend of mine, he was working in Libya, he sent a message, said, Isaac, you don't realize the impact that this is having on our working relationship. People see this is good. People in your hometown are doing something which is good to hear here. So maybe I think I should stop the story there and let you ask questions, because I'm sure you would have questions to ask. Yeah, stunned silence. Jeremy Wine Show picked up the news, and on Tuesday he came online, and I didn't realize that it's always the two sides of the debate, and I wasn't prepared for the other side. And as I was in the BBC studio, somebody from Glasgow, he was the opposition, he was saying, what you did is wrong. You're supposed to preach the gospel and save your Muslim neighbors. Instead, you welcome them and let them use the church. Don't you realize that we believe in the uniqueness of Christ? That's one of the big issues. On the spot, I had to answer, and I said, this is how I see the uniqueness of Christ, which is, he was the most ordinary human being. Most of us try to be other than what we are, but for some reason he tried to be as authentic as possible. His ordinariness is his uniqueness, and well, that's what I believe. And he didn't know what to say for that. Because you have to rant all the things that normally would say, oh, he did this, and this is the only way to salvation, blah, blah, blah. But I said, no. It's the total solidarity with humanity is what makes Christ unique, if at all.
I'll shout maybe.
It's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing the story. I wondered if anyone had followed your example, if any other churches had opened their doors.
One of the key impacts I felt was the thing was not, the situation is unique and the context was very particular. And I don't know how many churches have that kind of context where there is a neighboring mosque and overflowing and the church need to welcome them and to create the kind of cold atmosphere we get in Aberdeen. That's another added bonus. Besides that, the key impact was generally I get the feel wherever I go when people invite me or want to speak about this experiences, the sense of otherness of Islam to Christianity seemed to have changed. Because one of the questions that came from one of the neighboring churches, they have their God, we have our God. And I said, really? I thought you stand up and say on Sunday, I believe in one God. Either it has to be one or either you are having some problem with this oneness of God. I believe in one God, period. And I think those are the kind of questions. Another issue that people raised was, the church is a consecrated place for Christian worship. How could you let the Muslims into this place of worship? Now I said, there are a couple of issues here. When Jesus found himself in the temple in Jerusalem, and when he chased people out of the temple for desecrating it, one of the things that at least it says in the good book, that this is a place of prayer for all people. You must be missing that bit out. A place of prayer is a place of prayer for all people. And that is one thing. And the most kind of awkward answer that I give is, Christian church built for Christian worship, and it is consecrated for Christian worship. Yet on Sunday morning, when the Christians walk into the church, the first thing that they declare is that they are sinners. How could you come into a consecrated place and come and say that you are a sinner? You should check. There must be some problem there. If it is for all people, then it must be for all people. And if you come and say that you are a sinner, then there should be room for everyone else. So, and I think these are the things that people haven't thought through. But it comes to people, comes home. Yeah, after all.
I was wondering when you said, well, I imagine you've got some criticism from, a lot of criticism from, would not the imam have had some criticism for having gone into a Christian building, or did that not happen?
As far as I know, there were a few people from besides the things that I said, the orientation problem and the image problem, the idea of Muslims going into a church was seen as a problem. But the Imam said, first remember what has happened here. It is the church opening its door for us to go in. There is that hospitality that we can take or not, you accept or reject. And because it was a hospitality, in a positive sense. I think most of them, the character meaning the composition of people who come for prayer is wide-ranging, people from right around the world. For some of people who, say, from Morocco or Algeria, going into a church for a Muslim is not a big deal. And they happily call me, oh, Father Isaac. And even the church people hesitate to say that, but they comfortably say, and nurturing that kind of openness and mutual respect is what we kind of support. And yeah, there were one or two criticisms, I think, but strange thing, this was equal anxiety on both sides when it happened. The National Front locally, they came and protested, and also they said, you realize that you are going to empty the church. Strangely, it picked up, we got an increase of about 20%. And it's the same with the mosque. People were saying, oh, don't you realize that people will go away, drift away? Strange but true. The numbers have increased and it continues to increase. And the traffic from around the world has increased quite phenomenally. People just come to see the mosque and the church just to see what they've heard, whether it's true or not. Yeah, so initial criticism and hesitation, but eventually people have come to almost celebrate it, I think. Yeah.
I was going to ask, I think it's a really nice inspirational story. At the beginning you said about not necessarily the negativity, but like the criticism you had from after the email you sent from, I can't remember what they said, but the people that did say that initially, did you bring them round to your the open way of thinking, or?
There was a series of visitation. And some of the questions that I explored already in terms of the consecrated place of worship, the oneness of God, and the uniqueness of Christ, those are all the questions that came from the negative reaction. And people made arrangement to come and see me in the church and wanted to explore. It is quite, yes, it's been a steep learning curve for St. John's Christian community, for me, and for the Islamic community. One of the things which is next week is Ramadan, the fasting. In the Christian tradition, in the gospel, Jesus is supposed to have said, when you fast, it's an assumption. It doesn't say that you should, and when you fast, he assumes. So for Christians as well as the Muslims, fasting and the season of fasting is an assumed position. But yes, Christians fasting throughout Lent, that'll be the day. Truly, because this was one of the challenge and the question raised to me was, last year during Ramadan, Channel 4 came and filmed me sharing in the breakfast, and again it was broadcast, and some of my kind of Christian friends, they were challenging me and say, how come when the Muslims do the fasting, everyone gets to know about it and it becomes a big deal, but when the Christians do during Lent, and I stopped them there, Christians do what? Because the essence of oneness of God and belief that expressing solidarity with the suffering world is the essence of religion. The practice of Ramadan brings that close to reality than any other faith, I should say. People fasting together and breaking the fast together and observing the season for the whole period. The level of solidarity that expresses compared to Christian, for example, my daughter chose to give up something for Lent 2 years ago. Now she's 13, she was 11 then. And my son, Michael, he asked Elizabeth, what are you giving up for Lent? And she said, vanilla. And Michael said, vanilla? You don't like vanilla? And she says, that's why I give up. You see how what was meant to be total solidarity with one other human being. This is what love is about. You should be able to not only feel your love for the other, but you should have something that expresses in reality. And that is why the fasting with Islam is much, much more powerful. And if Channel 4 wants to record it, quite right. And I would say, yeah, why don't you gather together during Lent to do some real good thing rather than giving up vanilla and pretend that you're making some kind of sacrifice, and also through that you're making some solidarity. How does that work? And so, yeah, it does kind of raises all these questions constantly. And going back to the very essence of fasting itself, so I had to ask myself, so Jesus assumed, obviously, for him as a Jew, it was okay to fast. But what did he mean by fasting? And then the core of fasting begins with the Passover season with the atonement, meaning that it's at one-ment. The essence of fasting is making yourself at one with your neighbor, making yourself at one with God, and making yourself at one with yourself. Those are the components, and essence of fasting is that. Anyway, yes.
Do you feel confident that if the situation had been reversed, the imam and the mosque would have welcomed the church with open arms in the same way that you did?
The first Friday after the church was open, about 30 people would have been inside the church, and they all went out after the prayers. And about 12 of them gathered outside between the church and the mosque. And I just hang around, and this is conversation I was hearing, and one of I think his colleague, I know who he is, but then I didn't realize. And he was asking the rest of the groups. They were in a circle, and he said, imagine that. We have just been inside the church saying our prayers, and we've come out. Do you think we would do that? And for me, that was just about enough. It has raised a particular question in their minds. That is opening. Would it happen? I don't know. But I believe now that it is possible. It will. I think the sense of suspicion or question or doubt, which seemed quite strong in people's mind at one point, certainly seemed to have changed. People seem to feel, yeah, there's a long way for us to go, and we would be better off making the journey together. It looks like we have come to an end.
Thank you so much. I think most of you saw me speak this morning, but I hope you agree what an inspirational and powerful story. It's exactly the kind of reason that we want to bring so many people here together to celebrate change makers, because all of our change makers have done brilliant things in their own way, and we really appreciate you making the huge trip all the way from Aberdeen to share your story with us. So thank you very much. We hope that this has inspired you in the way it has inspired us, and we hope you stay for the rest of the weekend to find out more about our other change makers.
at 6 o'clock we're about to start an event on the Claw Ballroom and then a party later on, so it will be lots of fun. Please do stay. A huge thank you to Isaac for being with us, and I wish you all the best of luck in the future in your relationship